Hey, it's Tom from Texas, and it's time for another floppy deep dive. And thank you for taking the time to stop into my little channel and checking it out. Today we're going to be doing another episode in the series of
What's on that floppy?
Yep, we're going to be checking out some of these new games. I'm doing actually two floppies this week because one floppy is front and back and it would be just one game, so I figured I'd add a few more on there. So what's different about floppy deep dive compared to everybody else who just does a playthrough and shows you gameplay? I actually give you a little insight to the different games, a little history, when they came out, what systems they came out on, and we'll also look at some of the different systems and checking out what they looked like on those systems. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a joystick, and let's get started. So the first game we're going to be looking at today is Phantasie, and I loved Phantasie. I actually played this one quite a bit when I was a kid, and this was released on Strategic Simulations, and anytime you got anything from SSI, you knew you got a cool game coming. And Winston Douglas Wood was the writer of this game, and it came out in 1985, and it's a role-playing game, single player, and it was released on a lot of platforms: the Apple II, the Commodore 64, MS-DOS, Atari 8-bit, Atari ST, the Amiga, MSX, FM7, Sharp X1, and PC 98. Now, I'm not going to be looking at all those because that would turn into the many faces, but we will look at some of them. I'm definitely going to check out the Commodore 64 that's on this floppy. I'm also going to check out the Apple II version and the Atari version and the Amiga version because Amiga's cool and Commodore too. So we'll be looking at those four versions. So let me give you a little overview of the gameplay and what this is all about. So Phantasie, you take a group of 6 characters on the adventure of the countryside, and it's based on the Isle of Gelnor. And your goal is you're trying to defeat the evil Black Knights and their sorcerer leader Nicodemus. So you get to choose to be one of the 6 character classes. You could be a thief, a fighter, a ranger, a monk, a priest, and a wizard. And you could also choose between races of human, dwarf, halfling, elf, and gnome. Now, being a D&D geek back in the day, that I loved this kind of stuff. I thought it was so cool when I could play D&D on my computer. And this was awesome. And I always liked being a dwarf. So my character, Syrinx, again, as you can see, all my name's Syrinx, tying back to my sysop name of my BBS. That's my character, and of course I'm a dwarf and a fighter, and you could do different things, select randoms, and you could choose an ogre, a troll, a pixie, a gnoll, an orc, a lizard man, a minotaur, or other races too. And it was fun. I love this adventure. Like I said, I played this one quite a bit, wore this disc out, but apparently not too much because I could still load it up here in 2022. So this game had a broad mix of styles for the game: a town window where you could purchase in different various shops, a top-down style kind of dungeon crawl view, a top-down world map, and a separate combat window. And each character class had a unique fighting style and options, and all the characters could choose their strategy for a particular round in the turn-based combat sections. And I just love turn-based combat games. I don't know why those were really, but anytime something's a turn-based, I just love it. I thought those were the best games. After combat, the experience is rewarded, and the player would have to return to town to purchase their levels if they qualified. So you always want to go back to town, and that's when you share your gold and can purchase all your weapons and upgrade and do the different things that you normally do in these role-playing type games. So Phantasie went on to be very successful for SSI in the Commodore world, and it was the best-selling Commodore game as late as of 1987. It sold over 50,000 copies right here in North America. So in this game, you'll battle monsters, collect treasure, wield magic, and explore wilderness and dark dungeons. And the graphics are excellent, and the playability is one of the game's strongest features. So if you're just getting started with adventure gaming and want to do something new on your Commodore 64, this is one you could definitely get hooked on and play for a long, long time. So I give this game 2 thumbs up. In fact, I'm going to play it some more when I'm done with this video and after the Dallas Cowboys game, because this is going to be a blast to play some more. I'm glad that Tom, 14-year-old Tom, saved his game so I have my same characters that I can play again and continue on his adventure using these same characters. It kind of reminds me of my Me versus Me series videos where I play Space Taxi and Super Cycle. If you haven't checked those out, check those out, because it's just so great to have that link to the past to be able to play these awesome games. Now let's check out what this looks like on other systems. The Amiga version of Phantasie just looks amazing. They took this game to another level. It's all mouse played now. Look at the bank and the armory and the inn and the guild. Everything looks really cool and very detailed. Now let's go out of the city and check out what the wilderness looks like. So here's outside, and look at the detail of the trees and everything all around it. And again, I can control my movements with my mouse with the sword, and it just seems so much fluid and like the way it should be and how games would evolve to be when having the mouse. Of course, with the Commodore 64 you used your joystick or you could use the keyboard, but here with the Amiga the mouse just feels right to play this game. The characters when you fight look really cool. Look at the snake, very detailed. All your armor and everything looks very detailed in this version, and I just loved it. This is the first time I ever played the Amiga version, and I didn't even know it was on the Amiga until I was doing the research of the game. And so I started playing this and I was like, wow, this one's fun. So I might play the Amiga version instead of the Commodore version, since I've done the Commodore before, and just kind of evolve into doing the Amiga next. I don't know, maybe. But anyway, thought this was really cool how everything just kind of evolved in the Amiga world. So this next battle got pretty serious that you watch here, and look at all the guys that come up on the screen that I had a battle. And that's part of the fun. So everything's so random and the playability is so fun on these different games, but just because there's a uniqueness to it. And I know some people can get bored on turn-based, but not me. I think this is great. And you can attack at different levels. You can attack some of your characters can attack the third row or the second row. So you got that option to attack different ways too. So there's a little bit more strategies than just hope and holler and hope that something gets killed. So let's go ahead and move on to the next system. Let's look at the gameplay for the Atari 800 XL, and it's very similar to the Commodore 64, and how you move around in the town, the arrow is a little different where it's up and down instead of you could select the different things like in the Commodore, but the map looks very similar. And when it comes to fighting and doing the turn-based fighting, that looks very similar. The characters when they are fighting look similar. Definitely not like the Amiga. You can see the step back in the graphics when you go back to the Atari after you've seen the beautiful Amiga version. This one came out later than the Commodore. This one came out in 1987. And I didn't like when after you win the battle, your guys didn't jump up and down and celebrate like they did in the Commodore 64. I thought that was a cool touch, but the Atari took that away, so I didn't like that part of it. So let's watch a little bit of the gameplay and then we'll move on to the next system. So the last version we're going to be looking at is the Apple II version, and the biggest thing that jumps out to me on this screen is they got it cut in half. So on half of it they have the map, on the other half they have your characters. I started off this game, I only had one character, so I'm going into this game fighting. So when you battle, your map doesn't go away. It stays there and it just pops up on the other side where your battle screen is. So it's like your map and battle screen built right in. So obviously the colors and it looks a little bit different on the Apple II, but Interesting setup. I didn't hate it, and there's a lot more keyboard commands that you do on here, not so much anything dealing with the joystick, but I enjoyed the Apple. Let's take a look at it a little bit, and then we'll move on too. Next, we're going to be looking at the game Avenger. And Avenger came out in 1987. And I'm pretty sure this is the PAL version that I'm playing. There's a little bit of flickering off to the side, so immediately that's what it brings to my mind when this happens. And I don't even think this was officially released in the United States. I could be wrong, but I think it had to be ported over here or imported over here from the UK for us to even have this game. But that's okay. It played really well. The graphics looked really well. I liked being the ninja. Looked really cool with my throwing stars and taking out all the baddies with it. And you definitely have to figure out this map, and I didn't have enough time to go and map this whole thing out. I'm sure it might be online somewhere, but you need the map so you can keep up exactly where you've been. And the biggest part and the hardest part of this game is finding those keys. They just need more of them, and a lot of them, so you can get into the different areas. They made it way too hard to find those so you can keep going, so you have to repeat your steps over and over and over again, and that gets a little tedious at times. But I love that it's the gauntlet / druid style type game, and this came from a series of adventure game books called The Way of the Tiger, and that came out in 1985. And in there, you take the part of the young monk / ninja, and his name is Avenger. And you're on a quest to avenge your foster father's murder and recover stolen scrolls. So that's what the game's all about. So it also came out on some other systems. It came out on the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad system, and I believe the MSX system. We're going to look at 2 of those systems today. So let's go ahead and finish this one up and jump to the other systems. So next, let's look at the ZX Spectrum. This one was released in 1986, and it looks good for ZX Spectrum. I enjoyed playing this one just as much as I did the Commodore 64. Again, the same problems, not enough keys. One thing that I didn't mention is that when you press the 1 key, it summons an energy charge from one of the gods up above, and you only can use it 3 times, but it's something that, I don't always remember that's there, but it still doesn't help in finding all the keys that you need. So let's look a little bit at the ZX Spectrum gameplay, and then we'll move on and look at the Amstrad version. So last but not least, the Amstrad version, and again, everything's still the same, gameplay's the same, everything's the same. So I'm going to be quiet on this one and just let you watch the gameplay for a little bit on the Amstrad, and then we'll move on to the next game. The biggest thing here to compare is just the graphics and how the graphics are different between the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 and this one here. I'm a big fan of the Amstrad, but a lot of times they just port the games over directly from the ZX Spectrum, and when they do that, that's just lazy. Here they look like they did a little bit more work on it, so go ahead and let me know what you think about it. Next up, I'm playing a little Hypa-Ball, and this game I believe is from Germany, and even though I don't know what it's saying there, I'm assuming it's saying player 1 and player 2. But when it's a good game, and I like this game, don't get me wrong, I think some people didn't like it, but I am a fan of this game. Any game that starts off and it has cheerleaders, I'm in. And I love the introduction, the cheering at the beginning. Thought that was a nice little touch. And what it is, it's a futuristic sports game. And it came out in 1986. And you can have up to 3 team members, and that includes 2 strikers and 1 grounder. And the goal of the game is to hit the moving target in the middle, and the ball cannot be held for more than 2 seconds. If you hold it more than 2 seconds, the other team gets like a penalty shot, and they make it every time. And it took me a little while to figure out this game. I used to be better at it. In fact, I can remember winning at it. Even read on the internet that this game was too easy. But I got destroyed. I've only played it this one time, and it took me a little while to figure out what I was doing again. But I didn't mind. I almost made comeback, and you're not going to see enough of this video to see my mad comeback, because this is real time, these games, and it took a while to play all the way through it. The game moves really fast, and it's more a modern version of the game Pong. Now, Zap64 gave this game a 36%, which I thought was terrible. What a sorry rating. This game, even though it's not the most hottest sizzling game in the world, it is much better than 36%. I thought it had a great fun sports atmosphere, a great soundtrack, and it's so simple and addictive. I would give this game easily a thumbs up, and I would at least give it a B. I would have gave it like an 85%, but to give it a 36, I don't know who did it. Maybe they don't like sports, or maybe they just don't understand sports, but I give them a thumbs down, and I give them 36%. So I have great memories of this game and playing my older brother Rich. And the good thing about this game is anyone could come in within 5 minutes. They understood how to play. Even though it's futuristic, you could pick it up and get playing pretty quick. So if a friend came over to play, you didn't have to explain all these different rules. You gave them a joystick, you told them to sit down, and you start pushing the button and try to hit that pole in the middle. And that's all there is to it. So let's check out what it looks like on the ZX Spectrum version. So this one's all in English, and there's no cheerleaders in this version, and I don't think that, the graphics are as good as the good old Commodore 64, but the game plays the same. It's the same idea of what you have to do during this game. I liked it. I enjoyed it back and forth. I wonder how many people actually played this. I also reviewed what kind of magazines gave this, and they gave it 58%. So they were hard back in the day in 86 and 87 on these games. I think you could pick this game up. It was probably a budget game, so according to them, it cost around $10 back in the day when you'd get it. But I think this one would be highly worth it. Now, I probably just got mine off, I know I got mine off of a BBS and just downloaded this game. But when I got it, there's not disappointed. This floppy got a lot of use just because this game was on it. And I just hope that you guys have played it, and if you've never checked it out, make sure you do check it out because it's worth playing. So let's watch a little bit more of the gameplay and then move on to the next one. So the next game we're going to be looking at is Fist 2: The Legend Continues, and it was released in 1986. It came out on the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. But if you looked at my floppy back when I downloaded it back in 1986 off of some bulletin board, someone changed the name to Exploding Fist 3. So I always known this game to be Exploding Fist 3, and this actually is just the tournament phase of Fist 2: The Legend Continues. This is not even the actual game side of this. So this was more of a traditional one-on-one fighting game that plays similar to the previous games while serving up a sort of a training mode for the adventure side of the disc. But rather than grading hits on a half point or a full point system. The practice program gives players a set amount of health that is depleted as its hits land, so that's like the Fist to Adventure mode. The ZX Spectrum version here shows the adventure mode, so if you wondered what the adventure mode looked like, this is what it is. You're walking through like a forest and going through different things the way guys attack you, so it's more of like a gaming atmosphere and actually have more of a, I guess, a story to it, you might call it, but looks like you're going through different levels and so forth. But wanted to share with you what the adventure mode looked like. I didn't have the Commodore one available because, like I said, I just had it as Exploding Fist 3. So let's take a little bit look at the ZX Spectrum version in the adventure mode, and then we'll go on to the next game. So the game world extends through jungles and dojos and waterfalls and caves and dungeons and mountains, and as the player you face off against evil henchmen and dogs and some puzzles that you got to solve, and you got to click scrolls and pray at shrines to increase your health. So there's a whole story to it, and I'm gonna have to try it out. I can't say I'd ever played the adventure side of it, so I need to play more of it, but I want to play it on the Commodore 64. Next, we're going to be looking at Tournament Tennis by Magic. And this was not one of my favorite tennis games back in the day. I loved on-court tennis, but this one was on this floppy, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And it was a little bit hard trying to maneuver the guy and getting him to the right spot to hit it. I was working on it a little bit. I didn't play it too much. But for a tennis game, it really wasn't that bad. It was unique for its time back in 1984. I don't think there was a lot of different tennis games besides this one and maybe on-court tennis. So for the Commodore 64, this was pretty fun to play. I didn't play this one a lot, I would have to say, but the other one, like I keep saying, the on-court tennis, I battled my brother quite a bit. So that's what I compare everything to, and I'm comparing this one to. I would say this one's okay. I would give it a C, and I could only find it for the Commodore 64, even though they did say that it was released on different systems like the ZX Spectrum. So if you played it on that system, let me know what you think of that one. But I could only find it for the Commodore 64, and I tried my best to learn exactly how to do it, but I was not very good at this one. I definitely need some practice before I could get better at this one. But I think it could be fun, and it wasn't too hard to serve. Some games like to make it difficult serving. They just let you push the button and you get it over the net. But again, I give it a C, and if you haven't ever played it, it was worth at least just loading up and trying it once. So next up is a game called Lonely Rider, and it was released in 1984 by Happy Software. And Happy Software was a part of Datamost, and Happy Software was out of Germany. So as you could see, some of this words in here was from Germany that it was cracked from. And this is a typical cowboys and Indians type game where there's a cowboy riding around and Indians are attacking him, and you're on a horseback and you start off and you're kind of like in their village and they're attacking you, and you got a gun, you shoot them, and then you got to move on to the next level where you have the now you have a tomahawk and you got to use that while you're within there. And then next you move on to like a fort, and you got to go in there and get inside that fort while you're being attacked by Indians, and then you get to go inside the fort. And like I said, typical cowboys and Indians type scenario here. Not really the most PC anymore, I guess, these type of games, but back growing up when I was a kid, Cowboys and Indians was a big thing. Loved the Lone Ranger and that kind of stuff. And this kind of reminds me of that Robin Hood game in Commodore. If you ever played that, the style of this game is very similar to that, having to shoot different people and so forth. So
This one, that's basically all there is to it. Is you just got to be able to time and shoot your distance and time your tomahawk chops, and you could do either this in 1-player or 2-player mode. It's probably supposed to be in PAL mode since it came from Germany, and I don't think it was probably ever officially released in the United States at all. So let's look a little bit at this one, and then we'll move on to the last game. The last game is called Hades, and as you can see when it does the load up here, it says it was for the MicroMasters Holland competition. So this wasn't really an official release by anyone. It's just a game that Steven made and put out there, and everyone started sharing it all over the world. And when you had bulletin boards and modems to download games, they spread rather quickly, and they came over to here to the United States, and then somehow I got it too. And it's not a bad little game. You just walking around, looks like you're trying to collect these different little pearls. And I've seen these kind of games before, and I think you use a certain construction type set to build these games. Kind of reminds me of the construction set, and he actually did a pretty good job on this one. But I'll show you just a little bit of the gameplay and you can check it out, but I don't really have more than that about this game.
So that's it, guys. That's everything that's on these floppies. Did you play any of these games? I love the Phantasie. I played that one quite a bit when I was a kid. Still have my characters. I love whenever I can go back and play different games that I've played before and had my save game back from 1985 on there. That's really cool. And then these other games, loved all the different ones on here. What did you think about them? Put your comments down below. But don't stop there. There's a lot more videos to check out on what's on that floppy. So check out these other videos too if you haven't seen them already.